morning, Sumit. Good morning, all of you. Sorry to have kept you waiting. There was some technical glitch in my camera and that got us delayed, but I hope we can make the most of the leftover time. Good morning, Sneha. Jai Hind, Shrikant. Very beautiful morning, Richa. Good morning, Adarsha. Good morning, Anuj. Good morning, Saurav. I'm good, Saurav. Thank you. Good morning, Vagish. Good morning, Ritik. Good morning, Gopal. Good morning, Komal. Jai Hind, Shaurya. Good morning. Good morning, Ajay. Very good morning to you too. Good morning, Vartika. Good morning, Abhilash. Good morning, Vishal. Good morning, aspirant. Good morning, Abhishek. Good morning, Manasvi. Good morning, Swasti. Good morning, Anusha. Very good morning to you. Good morning, Shreya. Good morning, Akash. I have no idea, Akash, when will the offline class start. I hope the Delhi government relents soon. They have said that they are considering it. We have been sending them continuous petitions. So I hope they relent. Good morning, Ridesh. Good morning, Rahul. Very good morning, Rahul. Good morning, Mayank. Good morning, Akanksha. Good morning, Divakar. Good morning, Chitrangini. Very beautiful morning to you too, Richa. Good morning, Jyoti. Good morning, Akriti. Good morning, Bishwajit. Good morning, Sangram. Good morning, Yashwant. Suprabhat Vaibhav. Good morning, Ajay. Good morning, Nisha. I'm good, Nisha. Thank you. Hope you are good too. Pranam Mayank. Good morning, Malsom. Good morning. Can't see your name, but good morning. Good morning, Vikram. Okay, I hope most of you are settled well then, and we can begin talking today beyond 1980. We had talked till 1980 last class, and we will talk beyond 1980 today. Very good morning, Sai Kiran. That's okay, Ravindra. I think that should not be a problem doing the class. But others are not complaining, Ravindra. I mean, everybody else is okay. Good morning, Deepak. Good morning, Adarsh. ठीक हूँ बिल्कुल Adarsh. Thank you. Good morning, Prakhar. Good morning, Aditya. Good morning, Vijay. So check, Ravindra, if it is a system from your side. Check something. Beautiful morning, Adarsh. मैं ठीक हूँ Adarsh. Thank you. Okay, so I hope most of you are now with me. Good morning, Nikhil. So we can begin talking now. Good morning, Saurav. And get ahead. So what I will do with you is a beginning point will be the revival of Indian economy starting 1980s. Sumit, leave an email for me. We will discuss it. Ram Ram Vaibhav. All right, Sumit, leave an email for me. We will surely discuss it. Good morning, Subhakar. Okay, so let's get going. Reasons for economic crisis of 1991. In fact, this way I will be able to teach you also what was the crisis and why did we introduce the policy of liberalization or globalization or privatization and so on. So, when you look at reasons for economic crisis of 1991, the first was very high fiscal deficit of central and state government led to crowding out of private investment and decreasing supply capacity of economy, as most of it was on wasteful revenue expenditure. A high capital expenditure by government leading to increase in production capacity, can crowd in private investment. I will explain these terms to you. Whatever I have written on the board, I will explain it to you. What I have written is that there was very high fiscal deficit of central and state governments. Now central government's fiscal deficit was 8.4% of GDP, while state government's fiscal deficit was 4.2% of GDP. I'm sure you would have done fiscal deficit with Kapuria sir by now, and you will know that fiscal deficit is the borrowing requirement of the government. Now imagine almost 12.6% of GDP was the borrowing that government was doing from the market. 12.6% of the GDP was the borrowing that government was doing from the market. So what is the impact it creates? I'm quickly giving you an idea on that. That what is meant by when I use the term crowding out, when does crowding out happen, and when does crowding in happens. So I'm giving you an example of that. What I've written is very high fiscal deficit of central and state governments led to crowding out of private investment and decreasing supply capacity of economy, as most of it was on wasteful revenue expenditure. A high capital expenditure, I hope you have done these ideas. Revenue expenditures, sir must have told you, are expenditures which don't create a long-term asset, and expenditures that don't pay back the past loans. They are expenditures like subsidies, salary payments, interest rate payments. All these are revenue expenditure. So a lot of money was spent by India on all this, and there was less capital expenditure like making durable bridge, durable roads, good quality production houses. That was missing, and that if that had happened, there could have been crowding in. अब उसके करंट कंटेक्स्ट को समझना. A few days back there was a statement by the chief economic advisor that the high government spending will not result in crowding out in India, because there is a lot of capital expenditure which is happening that can rather lead to crowding in India. I'm telling you the concept of it. I'm giving you the idea that why did he say so, what is the meaning of that. So please try understanding it. See, when we use the word crowding out, crowding out means decrease in private investment due to increase in government expenditure. Now, why will this happen? With increase in government expenditure, borrowings of the government become more, with increase in government expenditure, borrowings of the government become more. So that is why it will happen, that now become more. It will reduce liquidity, that is availability of funds for lending in the economy, and that increases interest rate for private firms discouraging them from borrowing for investment. This is crowding out. All right, this is the meaning of crowding out. The decrease in private investment due to increase in government expenditure. जैसे सरकार अपने खर्चे बढ़ाती है तो सरकार के बोरोइंग्स बढ़ती हैं. जब सरकार लोन ज्यादा लेगी तो मार्केट की कैपेसिटी लोन देने की कम होती जाएगी, क्योंकि ज्यादा पैसा सरकार ने ही ले लिया मार्केट से. तो जो बाकी लोग हैं प्राइवेट सेक्टर के, उनको लोन ज्यादा हाई इंटरेस्ट रेट पर मिलेगा. अगर उनके लिए बोरोइंग्स कॉस्टली हुई तो ये लोग कम बोरो करते हैं और इसीलिए कम इन्वेस्ट करते हैं. राइट, ये इसी को कहते हैं क्राउडिंग आउट, दैट प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट हैज बीन क्राउडेड आउट बाय गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर. सरकार ने मार्केट में इतनी भीड़ कर दी कि प्राइवेट एक्सपेंडिचर क्राउड आउट हो गया. नाउ सी व्हाट इट मींस इज, with rise in government expenditure, government will borrow in the market. If government borrows more in the market, then there will be less availability of funds in the market for others to borrow, and therefore the interest rate in the market will go up. And as the interest rate in the market goes up, it becomes costlier for firms now to borrow and buy machines, set up a factory. So they start postponing it or leaving it. So when the firms do not take loans because they have become costlier to invest more, and the loans have become costlier because of high government borrowing, then it is called crowding out. This is what started happening in 1980s in India. This is what started happening in 1980s in India, that there was decrease in private investment, and that led to, and due to that there was increase in government, due to increase in government expenditure. तो सरकारी खर्चे बढ़े, सरकार के लोन लेना बढ़ा, the increase in government expenditure, the borrowings of the government became more, and as the borrowing becomes more, it reduces liquidity, and as liquidity becomes more, that is availability of funds for lending in the economy, and that increases interest rate. And then the firms get discouraged from borrowing. That is crowding out. Now what will that do? It will reduce production capacity because the firms are not investing, and government was spending money on poverty alleviation which was not reaching the people, making roads etc. which were not of good quality, spending money on interest payment and salary payment which was not for everyone. All that meant that government expenditure was not creating capacity and private investment was not picking up. So India's whole capacity to produce was getting compromised. सरकार के खर्चे कैपेसिटी क्रिएशन पे थे नहीं, जो सड़कें वगैरह सरकार बनवा भी रही थी उसकी क्वालिटी अच्छी नहीं थी, और क्राउडिंग आउट होने की वजह से प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट हो नहीं रहे थे, तो इंडिया के प्रोड्यूस करने की क्षमता जो है वो कम होती जा रही थी. The whole capacity to produce for India was declining because government expenditure was wasteful, it was not creating new capacity, and due to crowding out, private expenditure was also not creating new capacity, and that led to compromising production capacity of India. Alright, that is one aspect of it. Now what is crowding in? let's try understanding that some places you will see the word crowding in also used. So crowding in is no, Chaitanya. There is nothing great about government borrowing from foreign countries. It exposes you to foreign loans, and your foreign exchange will be more required then. Okay. When we use the word crowding in, please understand this. When we use the word crowding in means that that is the term we are using now. Crowding in means that we are talking about increase in private investment with increase in government expenditure in an economy. If government spends more on creating capital goods, and what are capital goods? All those goods which are used for further production of goods and services. Capital goods like, say, roads, communication, electricity, etc. Then it reduces cost of production for private sector by facilitating basic infrastructure availability for them. That is what it starts doing. That now the basic infrastructure availability will be there. So private sector will not have to spend on creating electricity generation or for transportation. The logistical costs will come down. There is cost of transporting, cost of storage. If these facilities are given by the government, then the cost of production comes down by facilitating basic infrastructure availability for them, and therefore encourages them to invest more. Now that is another possibility, that if there is expenditure by the government in sectors related to infrastructure, sectors related to capital goods production, then that can crowd in the private investment. So what I'm trying to teach you is, government expenditure on its own is not a bad thing, but which category of expenditure you are doing is important. If the government is spending more on capital goods creation, if the government is spending more on capacity upliftment, then that fiscal deficit can very well be paid back in future, because economy's capacity to produce will keep rising. अगर सरकार इस बात पे खर्च कर रही है जिससे कि इकोनॉमी के प्रोडक्शन करने की क्षमता बढ़े, तो जीडीपी बढ़ेगा, उससे इकोनॉमी सेव ज्यादा कर पाएगी, और जब सेव ज्यादा कर पाएगी तो क्राउडिंग आउट नहीं होगा. With government spending more on capacity creation, GDP growth will be at a higher rate, and higher rate of GDP growth will mean savings rate can increase. Higher savings will mean more capacity to lend in the market, and that will restrict crowding out from happening. So that is why it is important to understand that it is the choice of expenditure by the government which is very important. If government chooses to spend on capital goods and capacity creation, that can create crowding in, that can increase capacity production, that can increase output production and GDP growth, promoting savings and restricting crowding out. So whenever there is a talk that whether fiscal deficit is good or bad, say, look, it's not fiscal deficit which is good or bad, it's the quality of fiscal deficit you should look for. If the fiscal deficit is due to wasteful expenditures, if it is due to more of revenue expenditure which is not reaching the people, then that fiscal deficit is a bad idea. But if fiscal deficit is because of good expenditures on capital creation, road development, railway development, education facility development, healthcare facility development, electricity development, then that will add capacity to produce in the economy, and that's a great idea when it comes to economic growth in future, which will promote higher GDP, higher savings capacity, and higher savings will mean more liquidity in the market can come, and there will be less chance of crowding out. I hope the debate helps you in understanding the current debate around crowding out, crowding in, what did the chief economic advisor say, and so on. So hope that helps you on that, and hope it helps you understand the context of the crisis also. Okay, let's now go over or go back to our point then. So that was the reason in 1991 the crisis happened, because fiscal deficit was high, borrowings of the government was high, and it was creating more crowding out than crowding in. All right, that was the reason that in 1991 you had that huge fiscal deficit on part of the government. Okay, the second reason of crisis, I take you into that. Second reason of economic crisis was very high inflation. The second reason of economic crisis was very high inflation. Now, when you look at very high inflation in the market, inflation, I hope you understand, is the rate of increase in price. When you say very high inflation in the market, it is rate of increase in price. So very high inflation that took place in the market, very high inflation. The consumer price index for industrial workers, a consumer price index for industrial workers is like the urban consumer price index, urban prices, was rising at 11% per annum in 1990, and high inflation leads to instability in the market, as it starts developing higher future expectations of inflation. So today's high inflation will create more expectations that more inflation will happen in future. Today's high inflation will create more expectation that will lead to more inflation in future. So leads to instability in the market, developing high future expectations of inflation. It results in increasing price of raw material, wage rate, demanded by workers, and thus further discourages economic growth by discouraging investment. जब सारी चीजें महंगी होंगी, लेबर महंगा होगा, रॉ मटेरियल महंगा होगा, तो अपने आप लोग डरेंगे इन्वेस्ट करने से, और एम्प्लॉयमेंट कम होगी, इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ कम होगा. So when things started becoming costlier, when labor starts becoming costlier, when raw materials start becoming costlier, and that all is becoming costlier with higher inflation, creating expectations of even higher inflation in future, and that leads again to instability in the market, and it develops high future expectations and therefore discourages inflation. It discourages investment. This was the second reason that high inflation, that is rate of increase in price being high, led to discouraging investment, taking India towards the crisis that was in 1991. Then there was a third reason that created crisis of 1991. There was a third reason that created crisis of 1991. That was very high current account deficit. I hope you recall, current account deficit is the deficit due to exports of goods and services lesser than imports of goods and services, remittance inflow becoming lesser than remittance outflow, and income from abroad becoming lesser than income paid abroad. If all that happens, like if see, what are your inflows on current account? Just making you recall, what are your inflows on current account? Export of commodities, export of services, remittances that flow in, and income that flows from abroad. All these bring in dollar. And what are the outflows? Imports of commodities due to which you spend dollar, imports of services, remittances that flow out of the country, and income that flows out of the country. These all become your outflows. If the outflows dominate your inflows, then your current account deficit becomes high. If the outflows dominate your inflows, then your current account deficit becomes high. And current account deficit in India was pretty high in this time period. All right, current account deficit in India was pretty high in this time period. So that the current account deficit being high implied, I'm taking you into that, a very high current account deficit implied the current account deficit reached above 4% by 1990, which put huge pressure on foreign exchange reserves. Remember, if you have a very high current account deficit, then your foreign exchange reserves have to be used to pay back to the foreigners. अगर आपका करंट अकाउंट पे डेफिसिट बहुत ज़्यादा है तो आपको फॉरेन एक्सचेंज रिजर्व्स यूज़ करने पड़ते हैं कि आप फॉरेनर्स को पे बैक कर सको. सो दैट मेंट 4% of current account deficit meant that there was huge pressure on foreign exchange reserves to pay back the money to the foreigners. All right. This was like the high foreign account deficit, current account deficit was due to very high import of crude oil, intermediate goods. Intermediate goods are raw materials which are used for further production. So intermediate goods and new technology after liberalizing the import regime in 1980s. So import regime was liberalized, as I told you already, that now the rules about imports were brought down, the import duty had been reduced, and all that encouraged a lot of imports into India. However, exports did not increase as India's industrial structure was inefficient India's structure of industry was inefficient, leading to, and what was the inefficiency of India's industrial structure? High cost and low quality because of controls, because of licensing. Competition was low in the market, so those in the market knew that whatever they produced the people have to buy it. हर कमोडिटी में कम फर्म्स थे, तो फर्म्स को पता था कि जो भी प्रोड्यूस करेंगे लोगों को खरीदना ही है. दे हैड अ कैप्टिव मार्केट एज वी कॉल इट. कैप्टिव मार्केट मीन्स that the producer knows that whatever I produce, the consumer has no choice, they have to buy it from us, and then the quality of the product starts going down. So that was what was happening, that India's structure of industry was inefficient, leading to high cost and low quality. The structure was inefficient, leading to high cost and low quality. With this high cost and low quality of production, that is where the trouble starts coming in, because with high cost and low quality of production, it meant you did not have demand for exports, but imports were demanded heavily, and that resulted in high current account deficit. I will give you one more point on it, which I will come to in a little while. That was the Gulf War, but we will discuss Gulf War in another 5 minutes. So that is one factor that came in here across. Now this is about very high current account deficit that came in. Then the fourth reason that came up, fourth reason that led to the crisis was very high amount of short-term loans in the market. Very high amount of short-term loans in the market. Now what does that imply when we say very high amount of short-term loans in the market? Short-term foreign loans, I'm sorry, in the market. See, short-term foreign loans are those which will have to be paid back within 1 year. जो foreign loans या कोई भी लोन आपको 1 साल के अंदर पे बैक करना है, उसे शॉर्ट टर्म लोन कहते हैं. The short term foreign loans are those which have to be paid back within 1 year. So all those loans which have to be paid back within 1 year is what we call the short term foreign loans. Now in 1991, India's total short term foreign loans were $1.45 billion, while foreign exchange reserves were only $1 billion. So therefore the lenders panicked. लेंडर्स को लगा मेरे पैसे डूब गए भाई, जिन्होंने लोन दिए थे उन्हें लगा हमारे पैसे डूब जाएंगे, इस कंट्री के पास तो पैसे ही नहीं है लौटाने के लिए, जितने फॉरेन एक्सचेंज है उससे ज्यादा तो लोन ले रखा है शॉर्ट टर्म का इन्होंने. So the lenders panicked, thinking that this country doesn't have the money to pay back. How will they pay back the money? So the lenders panicked and started demanding immediate payback of loans, creating foreign exchange crisis. They said, give us our money immediately. So they started panicking. They wanted immediate paying back of loans, and that created the foreign exchange crisis. And then that was all compounded. अगर मैं बोलूँ कि ये सारा कुछ और क्या हुआ, तो it was compounded by two external factors. The disintegration of Soviet Union, because many times Soviet Union would come out and help us and give us trade at rupee rate and allow us to save foreign exchange, and Gulf War. Gulf War meant the war in the Middle East between Iraq and USA to liberate Kuwait. Like Iraq had occupied Kuwait, and to liberate Kuwait from Iraq, USA along with other forces attacked Iraq, and there was a war in the Middle East, that is the West Asia's point, and West Asia is the largest producer of oil, and that meant oil supplies got disrupted, and there was huge increase in price of crude oil, and India had a large import of it, adding to India's woes. India ke dukh aur badh gaye. India's woes increased because now crude oil price went up, our import prices went up further. Along with that, in Gulf, many Indian workers work, and they used to send remittances to India. These remittances dried up. So current account deficit became even worse because of the Gulf War. So Gulf War became the catalytic event. Catalysis करता है ना कोई chemical जैसे, वो Gulf War ने किया. The Gulf War speeded up the crisis, or the movement towards crisis. So that was the other factor. Fifth, external factors like disintegration of USSR, which supported with supply of lending and other commodities, and Gulf War which increased price of crude oil and reduced remittances from the region, further compounded current account deficit and led to the crisis. And this can be said to be the immediate cause, the immediate cause that was this Gulf War. The immediate cause can be said to be Gulf War. So Gulf War increased price of crude oil, reduced remittances, further current account deficit was worsened, and all this led to the crisis. So what was the crisis? The crisis was, all this that happened, the crisis was the crisis, if I may, the crisis in 1991, India was left with foreign exchange reserves just sufficient to meet 2 to 4 weeks of import expenditure, and not sufficient not sufficient to pay for short-term loans. The world contemplated declaring India bankrupt, कि ये देश दिवालिया हो गया है, इसके पास पैसे देने की कैपेसिटी नहीं है, and imposing sanctions. This was the economic crisis of 1991. This was the economic crisis of 1991. And then I will tell you how we came out of it, of course. But first you should have an understanding of what led to the crisis and what was the crisis. Because 30 years later, the talk that crisis was there becomes a lot murky. बहुत सारा मिक्सचर मिर्च मसाला डाल दिया जाता है उसमें, और असली मुद्दे की बात भुला दी जाती है कि हमारी इकोनॉमिक इनएफिशिएंसी सबसे बड़ा कारण थी इस क्राइसिस का. A lot of spice gets added to it, a lot of talks happen, but the real issue gets forgotten, that it was poor economic policies made over 1970s, made over 1980s, that made the structure of Indian economy poor and led to the economic crisis of 1991. So this is how you should take this topic, that economic crisis of 91 happened because of high fiscal deficit, high inflation, high current account deficit, high foreign loans taken as short-term loans, and then economy not prepared to face sudden fluctuation in the price of important raw materials like oil, and all that led to the economic crisis of 1991. I'm taking your questions now, and then I will quickly go further. High inflation was to some extent a result of printing money, no doubt. I can accept it, Shrikant. Printing money was happening and high inflation resulted due to that. Yes, Priya, consumer price index is the price index which measures average increase in price in the economy, which the consumers are consuming, of commodities which the consumers are consuming. That is called consumer price index. Average increase in price of the economy, which of commodities which consumers were consuming. All right. So now, Vaibhav, I'll tell you what. You can note down when I am talking, or what you can do is you can see the video again, pause it and note it down. I'll tell you why. There is a lot to cover in economics. If you see, I'm trying to make a pace which is comparatively lesser, if you ask me, for everybody to understand. I'm teaching you, I'm writing the things down on the board. So when I'm writing, I suggest you write it down with me. That can help. And then when I'm explaining, you can listen to me. But trust me, there is so much to do in economics. If we go slower than this, we will not be able to finish it on time. All right. So please pace up. थोड़ा ज़्यादा अपना पेस बढ़ा लो मेरे साथ और इसको समझो. समझने में तो दिक्कत आ नहीं रही है, लिखने में आ रही होगी. तो या तो वीडियो देख के पॉज करके फिर से लिख लेना, वीडियो देखना तो अलाउड है ही, या फिर दूसरा तरीका आसान ये है कि जब मैं लिखता हूं तो तुम लिख लो और साथ में सुन लो मुझे जब मैं बोलता हूं. ऑलराइट, ये बेटर तरीका है वैभव. अगर इससे स्लो गए तो फिर कोर्स ही खत्म नहीं कर पाएंगे. Alright, so I'm so sorry, but I cannot go slower than this. But what I can do is I can suggest to you what you can do to cope up. I hope it helps, Vaibhav. These are all factors for economic crisis, Nikhil. These are all factors for economic crisis. No. Harshad Mehta created a problem, but that was not a reason for economic crisis. Okay, so when sanctions are imposed on a country, Anuj, then that means the country loses control on its capacity to borrow, capacity to lend, to do foreign exchange reserves. All those capacities go away, Anuj. Okay, so let's try revising, what all I taught you and see if you can be helped on that. The first point we discussed was very high fiscal deficit of central and state governments, which led to crowding out of private investment and decreasing supply capacity of economy, as most of it was on wasteful revenue expenditure. I hope we are clear on that. I hope also that we are clear about the concept of crowding out. That is, when government spends more, interest rate rises, and private sector is discouraged from investing. And I hope you understand the concept of crowding in. That is, when government spends on capital goods, creates roads, electricity, railways, storage capacity, and so on, then that encourages private sector to invest more because it facilitates their production and reduces their cost of production. So that is what was the first point. High fiscal deficit of central and state government that led to crowding out and decreasing supply capacity of economy, because crowding out means private sector is investing less. When central government loans were 8.4% of GDP and state government loans were 4.2% of GDP, obviously the supply capacity, the loans were very high from the government side, and that meant the wasteful expenditures resulted in discouraging private sector. So now think, government was not creating capacity to the same extent and private sector was getting crowded out, reduced overall capacity to produce. Then we took the second point, very high inflation. I told you that the consumer price index for industrial workers was rising at 11% per annum. Consumer price index is the index which measures inflation in the economy. Alright, it is an index which measures average price rise and therefore it is used to measure inflation in the economy. High inflation leads to instability in the market. Why instability? Because it creates future expectations of inflation. जब लोग आज प्राइस बढ़ता देखते हैं तो उनको लगता है फ्यूचर में ये और बढ़ेगा. When people see that the price is rising today, they think that it will rise more in future. And as they think it will rise more in future, that means future expectations of inflation pick up. Now that results in increasing the price of raw material. It results in wage rate demanded by workers will rise. And with the rise in cost of production, the firms feel discouraged to invest, and that discourages economic growth. जैसे production के cost बढ़ेंगे, if the expenditure you need to do on production rises, then the firms feel discouraged from investing because the cost of investment becomes higher. So that was the reason again that economic growth in India started stuttering. लड़खड़ाने लगा growth क्योंकि inflation बहुत high था. Shaurya, the money was not sufficient to spend on latest technology. That was the problem. Then the next was very high current account deficit. The current account deficit was above 4%. And why was it very high? Because it put high pressure on foreign exchange reserves, and why? Because you have to pay this money out to the foreign countries then. And this was due to very high import of crude oil, intermediate goods, and new technology after liberalizing the import regime. So the firms were importing inputs, they were importing raw materials, they were importing technology, because in 1980s, as I have already taught you, the import regime got more opened up. But the capacity to export was not there because India's structure of industrialization was inefficient, leading to high cost and low quality. Since we did not have competition, we did not use good technology, we did not have modern equipments, that meant the costs were pretty high, quality was low, so the export market was again not up to the mark. And that became the reason of high current account deficit. So high current account deficit happened because of India's high imports and inability to get into exports. India's high imports and inability to get into exports. Then there was very high amount of short-term foreign loans in the market. Very high amount of short-term foreign loans in the market. That is $1.45 billion of short-term loans. और short-term loans का मतलब क्या होता है? Loans which have to be paid back within 1 year. Short-term loans are loans which have to be paid back within 1 year. Alright, that is called the short-term foreign loans. So in 1991, India's total short-term foreign loans were very high, while foreign exchange reserves were only $1 billion. Now that meant our foreign exchange reserves were lesser than what was needed to pay back the loans. And that meant the lenders panicked and started demanding immediate payback of loans, creating foreign exchange crisis. Then I told you that the immediate cause was external factors like disintegration of USSR, because USSR supported us with lending money and commodities being supplied to us, and Gulf War, which I told you was the war between Iraq and USA and its allies for liberating Kuwait from Iraq, and it increased price of crude oil, reduced the remittances from the region to India, further compounding the problem of current account deficit. And all this led to the crisis. And what was the crisis? 1991, India was left with foreign exchange reserves just sufficient to meet 2 to 4 weeks of import expenditure and not sufficient to pay for short-term loans. The world contemplated declaring India bankrupt and imposing sanctions. What did India do? The immediate thing was India pledged the gold with RBI to Bank of England and Bank of Switzerland to get foreign exchange reserves from them to pay back the immediate creditors, जिन्हें immediately पैसे देने थे उन्हें ऐसे पे किया गया. हमने अपना सोना गिरवी रखा. We pledged our gold to Bank of England, Bank of Switzerland, took money from them and paid back the immediate creditors to avoid being declared bankrupt. Then loan of $3.3 billion was negotiated with International Monetary Fund. The loan of $3.3 billion was negotiated with International Monetary Fund which put conditions for giving loans, initiating economic reforms in India. Initiating economic reforms in India. Rohit, I am on 11th slide at the moment. So this topic is now ending. You can begin afresh with economic reforms. All right, you can do that, Rohit. No, Lomarshi, inflation makes people pay more, so savings get discouraged. Inflation also reduces the real interest rate you will get on your deposits, so that further discourages savings. No, there was no sanction imposed, Vikram. There was a threat that sanctions will be imposed on India. स्टोरी को ठीक से सुनो विक्रम, मैंने ये नहीं कहा कि इंडिया was declared bankrupt. They contemplated declaring India bankrupt. Alright, उन्होंने सोचा कि इंडिया को bankrupt declare करना पड़ेगा, किया नहीं bankrupt declare. Corruption is a constant in India, Dineshwar. You know, corruption can be a cause, but corruption is a constant in India. So corruption was the reason why we had the structure weak. No, we don't. We are not moving towards any economic crisis in the current situation. I can assure you on that. Anusha, I just get a one written from your side if there is something. We were taking loans from all places, Prakhar. Our expenditures were huge. With such huge expenditure, the loans became huge. You know, so we were kind of taking loans all over the place. हम left, right, center loan ले रहे थे. We were the biggest borrowers in the world. I told you that story the other day. I hope you recall that we were the largest borrowers from World Bank. We were the largest borrowers from IMF. We were the largest borrowers from OECD countries, and we were the largest borrowers from even individual countries like Japan and New Zealand by 1980s. You know. And then the interesting thing is, then the leaders would come from a foreign trip. I'm sorry, the rulers will come back from a foreign trip and tell us that the world looks up to us. The world would have surely looked up to us that whether this country will pay back money or not, because we were so heavily indebted. So all that talk that you hear that pre-91 India was self-sufficient, well, beggars are not self-sufficient. We were into beggary. हम भीख मांग के जीवन चला रहे थे, तो भीख मांगे self-sufficient कैसे होंगे? दुनिया हंसती थी हमारे ऊपर. ये सच्चाई आपके जनरेशन को क्यों नहीं बताई जाती है पता नहीं. आइडियली बताई जानी चाहिए कि हम दोबारा भीख मांगे ना बने. You know, ideally we should tell our wrong things of history to our children so that they don't again become the same. You know, but we somehow try hiding it from you that, oh, India was doing, somehow a picture is tried being presented that India had self-sufficiency and we were doing good. Well, if we were self-sufficient, how come we were relying continuously on aid and continuously on foreign loans in the pre-91 periods? We were not doing that great. I'm not saying we were doing all bad. We were having green revolution and we had industrial diversification. We had some skill development. So India was not doing all bad, but India was not doing all great. And in the balance of things, India was not doing good. अगर उसे फिर finally एक conclusion पहुंचे तो pre-91 we were not in a good shape. Our industrialization was backward, our agricultural production was not reaching the people, our poverty rates were high, social indicators looked poor. So there was not something great that we looked at. Yes, we were doing okay as a developing country, but we were not doing something huge or great as a developing country. That's okay, Anusha, perfect. पैसा ज्यादा छापोगे तो इन्फ्लेशन होगा निखिल, सामान तो है ही नहीं इकोनॉमी में. दिक्कत तो ये है ना, पैसा छापोगे तो सामान भी होना चाहिए ना उस पैसे से खरीदने के लिए. पैसा छाप लिए, सामान है नहीं, तो लोग उस पैसे को लेके मार्केट में जाएंगे खरीदने को और मार्केट में सामान मिलेगा नहीं उनको, तो उस केस में क्या होगा? इन्फ्लेशन ही बढ़ेगा. यही हो रहा था 80s में भी. गवर्नमेंट पैसे तो छाप ही रही थी लेकिन सामान थे ही नहीं मार्केट में. So if you print money, but if you don't have commodities to sell in the market because your supply side is weak, then printing money will make people take that money to the market to buy goods which don't exist, and that will lead to more inflation. So that's not a good idea. Okay, so now we get into, so what did India do? We pledged our gold, we negotiated with IMF, took loans from them, and then they put certain conditions on India, and economic reforms began in India. So 1991, economic reforms began, but I want you to begin this story with a caveat. एक precaution के साथ begin करो. There were many reforms that India did which IMF did not ask us to do. Because people like Dr. Manmohan Singh ji, who was the finance minister, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who was the finance secretary, Dr. Arvind Veermani, who was the chief economic advisor, Dr. Bimal Jalan, who was the RBI governor, Venkataraman, Bimal Jalan, who was the industrial advisor. All these people had been talking about bringing reforms into India since 1960s and 70s. And thankfully for India, all these people were at the top together in 1991. and they were supported by Narsimha Rao ji, who was a prime minister who believed in reforms. So the political will to do reforms came in, and India started reforming. And then there is a question that arises, ठीक है, then why do people say that it was only because of IMF that India reformed? I repeat again, I am not saying, I have written it rather, IMF was a reason for reforms, but the reforms in India went much beyond what IMF asked us to do. IMF एक कारण था रिफॉर्म का, लेकिन इंडिया के रिफॉर्म्स IMF से ज्यादा आगे चले गए. So what were these reforms that were there in India that we did? I will teach you. But why did we do it? Because the people leading India in those days were themselves convinced that India needs to reform. And since they were themselves convinced that India needs to reform, it implied, since they were themselves convinced that India needs to reform, it implied that India went for much larger reforms than what was needed. Now the question arises, then why was it popularized that IMF pressurized us into reforms and only because of that we reformed? See, it was politically very convenient. Which party was ruling mostly since independence? So it was the Congress party. So which party will have the maximum number of interest groups who were gaining out of the poor economic policies? The Congress party. Now, if the Congress Prime Minister, Narsimha Rao ji, would go after reforms, who will be hurt the most? All these people in the Congress party who were gaining because of the poor system. भाई जो लोग फायदा उठा रहे थे खराब सिस्टम का, ज्यादातर लोग कांग्रेस पार्टी में थे, क्योंकि वही पार्टी रूलिंग पार्टी थी इंडिपेंडेंस टाइम से. तो अब अगर ये रिफॉर्म्स होंगे तो सबसे ज्यादा दिक्कत तो उन्हीं को आएगी जो रूलिंग पार्टी में थे. तो अब आसान तरीका क्या है? व्हाट्स एन इजी वे आउट देन टू अवॉइड द प्रेशर दैट दीज पीपल विल पुट ऑन द प्राइम मिनिस्टर? टेल देम वी आर नॉट डूइंग इट, व्हाट टू डू, इट्स ऑल अबाउट IMF. And knowing very well that they will never try checking what IMF is asking us to do. So there were many reforms India did that IMF did not ask us to do, but the Prime Minister maintained a silence whenever an allegation was put that it's because of IMF that India is doing all this. So all reforms were not because of IMF, but also because we knew what we were doing, but politically it was much better. The right-wing opposition, Bharatiya Janata Party, loved saying that look, they are a weak government, they are buckling down in pressure. The left-wing opposition, the Communist Party, loved believing that all wrongs are because of America. So all that suited the political domicile of the day, and the academicians, unfortunately or fortunately, mostly on the left-wing spectrum again, would try popularizing the theory that all reforms was because of IMF. But again I repeat, IMF doesn't ask you to change the microeconomic structure. India went ahead and did all that. IMF just asks you to do control your fiscal deficit, control your current account deficit, control your inflation, and bring your growth back on path. That is what IMF asks you to do. Open up your economy, allow for foreign investment. All that we did, and all that was under IMF pressure. But I repeat, we did more things which was beyond IMF pressure, because the chief economic advisor, the prime minister, the finance minister, the finance secretary were all people who were convinced that these reforms are required in India to make sure that India can be uplifted from where it is. Yes, Saurav, they can give loan. How can you pay back foreign loans by printing money, Nikhil? Foreign loans are in dollar terms. How will you pay dollars by printing rupee? Think, Nikhil, you can't do that. Okay, so we take the story further now, and I introduce you into economic reforms. And just to tell you one thing which I must share with you, by 2000, within 8-9 years of reforms, by 2080, we had paid back all loans of IMF. By 2002, we had started contributing money in IMF. Today, we are the 8th largest contributor to IMF. By 2080, we had paid back all loans to OECD, Japan, New Zealand, etc. By 2002, World Bank loans were only for infrastructure projects. In fact, in 1958, World Bank had created a special organization called Aid for India Forum. हम इतना भीख मांगते थे कि उन्होंने कहा एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ही बना देते हैं भाई तुम्हारे लिए, तुम्हें ही देगा ये पैसा. So there was an organization created within World Bank, within International Development Agency of World Bank, called Aid for India Forum in 1958. In 2002, when India stopped taking all aids, then World Bank renamed this forum and called it India Development Forum. Now that's an achievement. Also remember, we had a tsunami in 2004 and we didn't look for aid even then. And you know, I'm not a very expressive person with yeas and yo's and come on, but 2004 January, I remember 2005 January, after the tsunami, when the world was offering us aid and when the Indian government said, we don't need aid, we have money, and we were not saying it as bravado, we had $50 billion by that time. So we said, don't give us aid, we have the money. If you want to help India, come and invest in India. You know, now that day I felt like doing a yay, we have arrived. We don't look for help anymore and we are self-sufficient in that sense. That is the idea of self-sufficiency, that you should be in a position to give rather than take. And thankfully we have kind of maintained it. COVID has hit us badly. We looked for some aid on vaccination, but we didn't look for money for it. We had the money, we are looking for the intellectual property rights and so on and so forth. That's very important. We are still sitting on more than $600 billion. You know, so that is the whole aspect that I needed you to know. That post reforms, few good things have happened, few bad things have happened. Reforms have had their positive, they have had their negative, and that is what now we will analyze. What is economic reforms? What steps has India taken? What are the benefits of those steps? And what are the challenges those steps have created? That is a critical analysis of economic reforms that I begin today, and it will continue in the next 2-3 sessions. Next 3 sessions, in fact. So what are economic reforms? What are the steps taken? What are the benefits of those steps? And what are the challenges? That is how we will try understanding the whole gamut of 1991 to 2021, the 30 years of economic reforms, and what have we done, where have we made mistakes, and so on. So let us see this now. When we look at economic reforms means, this means making policies to find out, make it like this. It is the process of finding out the reasons for inefficiency and making policies. It is the process of finding out the reasons for inefficiency and making policies to remove those reasons. The process of finding out reasons for economic inefficiency and making policies to remove those reasons. That is what we call economic reforms. All right. Process of finding out the reasons for inefficiency and making policies to remove those reasons. That is what we call economic reforms. But who will sell dollar to you, Mayank? You know, you are believing that people will be selling dollar in return of rupee. But who will sell dollar to a country by taking rupee? Who will accept rupee, a currency which is challenged by high inflation, a currency that is challenged by a poor economic structure? तो रूपी खरीदने वाला भी कोई चाहिए ना भाई. जब तुम एक्सपोर्ट ही नहीं कर पा रहे हो, जब तुम्हारे यहाँ कोई इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं आ रहा है, तो रूपी कौन खरीदेगा? डॉलर देगा कौन तुम्हें रूपी के बदले? ये तो सोचो. Mayank, I hope I am reaching you on this. That who will buy rupee? You say that let us use rupee to buy dollar. So you need someone to take rupee and give you dollar. Who will take rupee? Why will anybody take rupee? Rupee belongs to a country which is poor. Rupee is the currency of a country with high inflation. 1991 I am talking. Rupee is a currency of a country which is not exporting much. Rupee is a currency of a country which is highly into loans. Who will buy that currency? थोड़ा सा मयंक अप्लाई करो खुद को रादर देन लिनियर सोचने के. कभी कभी क्या होता है ना, हमारा दिमाग एक जिद पे अड़ता है, नहीं मेरी बात कैसे नहीं सही है, उससे बचो. लिनियर मत सोचो, लैटरल, थोड़ा सा लैटरल थिंकिंग करो कि भाई जब कंट्री की हालत खराब तो खरीदेगा कौन उस पैसे को, ये सोच के देखो. So that is what will answer your question, that why can't we convert? Who will buy your currency? Which country in the world will accept rupee and give you dollar? Even today you tell me that if you try telling someone we will give you rupee, please give me dollar, they'll say keep your rupee, we don't want it even at 75 rupees per dollar. We are happy with our dollar because dollar is more acceptable. So please understand, the supply of dollar will rise and demand for rupee will rise if you export more, if your investments are more. Simply by printing money you will create inflation which will further dilute the value of your currency because its purchasing capacity will go down and the world will not be willing to buy that rupee. तुम में से जितनों के मन में ऐसे ख्याल आते हैं आज के बाद मत लाना. ऑलराइट, ऐसे ऐसे शेख चिल्ली वाले ख्याल आएंगे मन में कभी कभी, अरे पैसा छाप लेते हैं दुनिया ठीक है. ऐसे नहीं चलती दुनिया. You can't print money and live life because the world won't accept your currency. I hope Mayank I reached you. Cocks and kings kind of things get money or give you money only because they trust your currency. That exchange is via RBI. No currency exchange can take place without the involvement of central banks of the country. So it is only when the central banks of the country permit it that these exchanges will happen, Mayank. Otherwise they don't happen. Alright, it's not that Cox and King doesn't print dollar. Cox and King buys dollar and will be willing to exchange it for a currency only when they trust that currency. Otherwise they won't be willing to exchange it for a currency. I hope you understand. Okay, I hope you all got the joke also. You are my society, so I keep playing jokes with you. But India में ऐसा कहते मैंने बहुत लोगों को सुना है, पैसा छाप लो दुनिया ठीक हो जाएगी. तुम ज्यादा पैसा छापोगे तुम्हारे इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ेगा, इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ेगा तुम्हारा कंट्री का परचेजिंग कैपेसिटी ऑफ करेंसी कम होगी, करेंसी और जी वैल्यू होगी, और ज्यादा करेंसी देनी पड़ेगी डॉलर लेने को, उसके बदले तुम और पैसा छापोगे तो और करेंसी देनी पड़ेगी, जितनी करेंसी डी वैल्यू होगी उतना इन्फ्लेशन और बढ़ेगा. तो सोचो ये क्या क्या सर्कल में फंस रहे हो. You understand that? So it's like believing that if I keep studying from guidebooks, it will make me qualify UPSC. It doesn't. You will have to study hard and study from the basic books. So that is the aspect. Guidebooks can't take you far, no? Shortcuts don't help. I will teach you that, Lomarshi, when I'm teaching you money and banking. Right, Himshika? When you export to foreign currency, you are paid in foreign currency. When you export to the countries abroad, they give you foreign currency in return. Recall the points I told you. Supply of dollar to India will come if Indian commodity is demanded, if Indian investment is demanded, if remittances come into India, and if Indian currency is expected to appreciate. Then dollar will come into India. So inflow of dollar on those four factors. I've taught you the basics. I hope all of you will recall. India doesn't print dollar, and printing money cannot buy you infinite dollars. Perfect, Mayank. Thank you. Exactly, Venezuela, and not only Venezuela, Bolivia also suffered because of that. Brazil in 1994. हम लोग अकेले नहीं ऐसा सोचने वाले, ऐसी हरकत करने वाले हो चुके हैं प्रेसिडेंट वगैरह अपने देश के. ब्राजील के प्रेसिडेंट थे, वेनेजुएला में ह्यूगो चावेज ने ये काम किया, and all that creates crisis in economy. So always keep it in mind. Printing money is not a solution. Printing money doesn't help. You can only print as much money which is supported by production in your economy. Right, Adarsh? Zimbabwe is another example. Correct, Akhil. Okay, so let's get back to this then. Now, what all economic reforms did India do? So, India introduced reforms of two broad types. Thank you, Mansi, for getting the point, or joke rather. No, they can print more than the value of gold, Saurav. I will teach you that when I'm teaching you money and banking. All right, right now you hold on. I will teach you that. Okay, it is the process of finding out the reasons for inefficiency and making policies to remove those reasons. Now, India introduced reforms of two broad types. A, microeconomic structural reforms. This means changing structure of particular sectors to make them more efficient. That is microeconomic structural reforms, changing structure of particular sectors to make them more efficient. Changing structure of particular sectors to make them more efficient. I will give you example. See, for example, telecom sector in India was a government controlled monopoly. Monopoly means single seller. So telecom sector in India was a government controlled monopoly, like only MTNL for the metropolitans of Delhi and Mumbai, and DOT, Department of Telecom, for the other regions. So metropolitan में उस समय BSNL नहीं होता था. Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited was not there in those days. MTNL was there, Mahanagar Telecom Nigam Limited, and DOT, Department of Telecom, would give telephone services to non-metropolitans. And tele-density of India was very low. Tele-density means the number of telephone connections per thousand of population. Tele-density means number of telephone connections per thousand of population. So tele-density of India was very low, 2 per thousand. Out of 1,000 people in India, only 2 telephone connections used to be there. And I'm sure some of you who would have grown up in mid-90s and early 2000s, you would recall that having a phone used to be a big deal in India till as late as 2002-3. If somebody had a phone, it meant the person was a bada admi. Then that person had phone. It was only later on that having a phone became very normal in India. So I repeat again, the telecom sector in India no, it will not travel physically. It will only be account book traveling, Mayank. This is not a Sheikh Chilli doubt. और Sheikh Chilli doubt नहीं था. Sheikh Chilli thinking होती है ये. Sheikh Chilli कौन था? जो बैठ के ख्वाब बनाता था. Sheikh Chilli was a person who would sit and dream that big things will happen without working for it. In India, you have politicians. Forget you guys are students. You are just learning economics. You have politicians in India at responsible positions whom I have heard saying, why can't we print money and just get out of it? तो वो शेख चिल्ली के ख्वाब है कि पैसा छाप के काम हो जाएगा. और ये अच्छे खासे पढ़े लिखे लोगों से सुनता हूं. तो इसीलिए बोला मैंने कि ये शेख चिल्ली वाले ख्वाब होते हैं जो हम सोचते हैं. डाउट्स तो कभी शेख चिल्ली के नहीं हो सकते. बट इट इज ओनली अकाउंटिंग ट्रांसफर, मयंक. Yes, Saurav, and the part of fiscal deficit which is printed is deficit financing. Right, Hridesh? Correct. Okay, taking you back into the discussion again, microeconomic structural reform means you target a particular sector. I was giving you the example of telecom. So in telecom sector, we had the monopoly of the government. Government was the only seller, and it resulted in very low tele density. So the government changed the structure of the market from government controlled monopoly to a competitive system by introducing Airtel, Hutch, and Idea along with the government companies. So that meant there was more competition in the market to promote higher supply of commodity. ध्यान से सुनते रहना मेरी बात. Microeconomic structural reforms means changing the structure in a particular sector. For example, telecom was a sector. In telecom, there was government controlled monopoly which resulted in very short supply. People did not get telephone connections very easily. And then the government opened up the sector, changed the structure from government controlled monopoly to a competitive market, and that competitive market structure resulted in higher and higher level of production capacity generation. So changing the structure from monopoly to competition, in which sector? One sector called telecom. That is why we call it microeconomic. Microeconomic means, if you recall in the beginning, I'd given you the notes, one sector, one commodity. So microeconomic in telecom, structural reform, changing the structure from monopoly to competition. Right, Mayank, thank you. That is what is one factor. Second, when you talk about another example of microeconomic structural reforms, if you talk about another example of microeconomic structural reforms, I will tell you that. If you recall last class, I was telling you that commodities like steel, commodities like aluminium, commodities like sugar, their prices were controlled by the government. Whenever price is controlled by the government, we call it administered price regime, APR. जब भी प्राइस सरकार कंट्रोल करती है तो उसे कहते हैं administered price regime. Whenever price is controlled by the government, it is called administered price regime. So wait Ajay, I will come to that. Administered price regime, again remember, implies that price of the commodity is fixed by the government. Administered price regime implies price of the commodity is fixed by the government. Now government in 1991 reforms again changed this rule. It said in sectors like steel or sectors like cement, government will not fix the price anymore. The price will be fixed by the market. So changing the pricing mechanism from administered price regime to market determination of price is again a structural reform done in particular sectors like steel or aluminium or sugar. So again a microeconomic structural reform, changing the structure from government fixation of price to price being fixed by forces of demand and सप्लाई. तो पहले भी प्राइवेट सेक्टर प्रोड्यूस करता था, अभी भी प्राइवेट सेक्टर प्रोड्यूस करता है. Earlier also it was in private sector production control, now also in private sector production control, but earlier the price was fixed by the government, now the price would be fixed by the market. If you recall, I had told you the story that private sector would then deliberately mismanage their companies and ask for subsidy from the government. With this reform, the government said, now we are freeing you, we are setting you free, we are allowing you to choose your price, your output, and so on. So we will not be giving you any subsidies any further. So this is again the idea of a microeconomic structural reform. Why microeconomic? Because it was not for all the sectors, it was for particular sectors like steel, cement, etc. Why structural reforms? Because it changed the structure from price controlled by government, administered price mechanism, to price charged by the market. That was a microeconomic structural reform that we went by. I hope, Ajay, you got the first point in that. That means it is not always privatization which will lead to microeconomic structural reform. It means many other things. So I hope as a classroom you are clear on what is meant by microeconomic structural reform. As a classroom you are clear by what is meant by microeconomic structural reform. That is changing the structure of the market or of the particular commodity distribution in order to improve production capacity. Think in iron and steel in 1991 our total production capacity was 6 million tons. By 2020 it has increased to 300 million tons. Similarly, in cement, the total production capacity was 24 million tons in 1991. Today it is again, I'm so sorry, in steel it is 100 million tons. I will repeat myself. In 1991, the total production capacity of steel was 6 million tons. By 2020, it has increased to above 100 million tons. Around 106 million tons is India's steel production capacity. We are the second highest producer of steel in the world today after China. So steel production capacity, which was 6 million tons in 1991, rises to around 106 million tons by 2020, making India the second largest producer of steel in the world after China. And similarly, cement production capacity was 24 million tons in 1991, 24 million tons, rises to more than 300 million tons by 2020. So large production of steel started taking place after that. Large production of cement started taking place after that, mainly also promoting the real estate and construction revolutions in India. So, one sector gets connected to another, and when you bring reforms at a microeconomic level, it does have an impact even for the entire macroeconomic picture. Yes, Akanksha. Now, we take it further. The second broad market reform that was brought in, B, is macroeconomic stabilization. That is the second broad reform that was brought in. Macroeconomic stabilization. Now, when we use the word macroeconomic stability, this means, it means meeting expenditure from own resources without compromising on long-term sustainability by taking large debts. अपने खर्चे अपने ओन सोर्सेस से मीट करना, बहुत सारा लोन नहीं लेना, यह है मैक्रो इकोनॉमी को स्टेबलाइज रखने का तरीका. अ स्टेबल मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक, not yet sure, yeah, at least. That is again because of different reasons in the market, Karamveer, mainly because of, again, lack of competition in the market. And there is huge taxation on the companies. Let's not forget steel is in the 28% tax category. So before accusing the firms, government should reduce the tax on them, if you ask me. Okay. When we come to this, means meeting expenditure from our own resources without compromising on long-term sustainability by taking large debts. That is macroeconomic stability. Macroeconomic stability means keeping fiscal deficit in control, current account deficit in control, inflation in control, and growth stable. Fiscal deficit in control, current account deficit in control, inflation in control, and growth stable. A stable growth rate, fiscal deficit not very high, current account deficit not very high, and inflation not very high. If an economy is having all that, then it is said to have macroeconomic instability, stability. So when your fiscal deficit is high, current account deficit is high, inflation is high, and GDP growth is fluctuating, then it can be said that the economy is facing macroeconomic instability. Now, we have an equation for macroeconomic stability. There is an equation for macroeconomic stability. The equation of macro investment stability is based on circular flow, and it represents resource gap or savings investment gap equation. It represents resource gap or saving investment gap equation. I will tell you the equation, we will discuss it. It's important. 18% plus there is a transportation tax of 6% by state governments which is not included in GST, Akhil, and there is a 4% registration duty tax. So overall, Akhil, it is 28% that the steel industry has to pay as a tax. There are state government level taxes not included in GST, and there is a stamp duty put on them for registration. So all that puts the tax very high on steel industry at the moment, Akhil. Okay, so when you say resource gap or saving investment gap equation, it comes like this. I hope you will recall the circular flow idea which said that all income should be equal to total expenditure in the economy. That is the circular flow equation, that all income should be equal to total expenditure in the economy. Within that it says consumption plus savings plus tax. Within that it says consumption plus saving plus tax should be equal. So why do I write this? सोचना ध्यान से, ठीक है? अभी खुद को बिल्कुल जिंदा रखना. Remain alive, keep listening to me. Consumption, what will you do with your income? You can consume your income, you can save your income, and you have to pay tax with your income. What can we do with our income? We can consume our income, we can save our income, or we can pay tax with our income. And what are the aggregate expenditure levels in the economy? Consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net exports. This we have already done in the expenditure method. While discussing expenditure method in the economy, we have already discussed consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net exports. So we understand consumption, saving, and tax, and we understand consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net exports. These two things we put on income side and expenditure side. Usage of income, all right, and expenditures on income. Now see, when we look at this, consumption can be cancelled both sides, it's the same thing. Then I'm just rearranging this equation and we can write saving is equal to investment, this I, then I take this t to the other side, so plus g minus t plus net exports. This equation has a meaning. Please understand this. And this is the macroeconomic stability equation. Your private saving, that is your saving by households and saving by corporate sector. Private saving is the saving by household and saving by corporate sector. So your private saving should be equal to the requirements of private investment plus fiscal deficit, and then further it can add to the current account surplus. That is how we represent all these things. We say government expenditure is G and let government receipts be T, so the difference between the two will be the deficit of the government. It's a representation. Don't take it as the entire formula. I'm sure you know that this is not fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is more than this. But as a representation it is taken. So the representation is that G minus T is your fiscal deficit and net exports is your current account surplus. So the meaning of this story is that if your private saving, suppose, is 28% of GDP, and if your private investment is 30% of GDP, and if your fiscal deficit is say 4% of GDP, then you will need a current account deficit of 6% of GDP to cover for this resource gap. अगर आपकी सेविंग इनफ नहीं है आपके इन्वेस्टमेंट और फिस्कल डेफिसिट के रिक्वायरमेंट्स को मीट करने के लिए, तो उसे ही कहते हैं रिसोर्स गैप. Alright, when saving is not sufficient to meet the requirement of investment and fiscal deficit, that is called a resource gap. Then you will have to import resources to meet all the expenditure requirements, and that will create a current account deficit. If saving is not sufficient to meet investment and fiscal deficit requirement, it creates a resource gap. And then you will have to rely on imports. You will have to bring money from abroad, bring resources from abroad to meet it. Now, obviously, you cannot bring resources from abroad without paying for it. So to pay for it, what do you need? You need foreign exchange reserves. How will you arrange this foreign exchange reserves? You have two options. Either you borrow or you allow foreigners to invest in your country, which will then bring more foreign exchange reserves on capital account. So this current account deficit can be fulfilled by capital account surplus. अगर तुम्हारे पास करंट अकाउंट पे डेफिसिट है तो उसे पूरा करने के लिए तुम्हें कैपिटल अकाउंट पे सरप्लस चाहिए. ये मॉड्यूल 3 में पढ़ चुके हैं हम लोग. So the current account deficit can be fulfilled by capital account surplus, and that can happen either if the country borrows a lot, but then more borrowings increase dependency. The other option is allow foreign firms to invest in India. As they invest more in India, they will bring foreign exchange reserves along with them, and that will help in bridging this gap. Why? Because investment of foreigners coming into India is like foreign savings adding up to this private savings. Foreign savings adding up to this private saving. So that is foreign investments coming into India is like foreigners saved it in their country, and then that money is not invested in their country, it is invested in my country. So their resource bridging the gap of my saving investment system. So I repeat again, if savings are not sufficient to meet the requirements of investment and fiscal deficit, if savings are not sufficient to meet the requirements of investment and fiscal deficit, then you will have to import resources which will create a current account deficit. Due to current account deficit, to pay for that, you need a capital account surplus. And for capital account surplus, either you will have to borrow from abroad, or you can allow foreigners to invest in the country. So foreign savings will start supporting private savings, and this saving investment gap will be bridged accordingly. That was the reason that India allowed foreign investments to come into the country. It reduces your dependence on foreign borrowings, allows them to invest, utilize the resource, and allows you to bridge this gap of saving investment. That was the reason why macroeconomic stability was sought, by controlling fiscal deficit, trying to control current account deficit, making sure inflation can be controlled, allowing foreign investments into the country. So that is the idea of macroeconomic stability, that keep this equation going. And how do you do that? I repeat again, when my savings are not sufficient to meet my inner requirements, my investment and fiscal deficit requirements, then obviously I am dependent on a foreign country to buy resources from them. When I buy resources from them, I have a current account deficit. To pay for that current account deficit, I need foreign exchange reserves. Now those foreign exchange reserves can come either as borrowings or as investments from abroad. India opened up its markets, allowed foreign firms to invest in India, so foreign savings started coming into India, and together these were used to bridge this gap. That was another story of reforms. All right, and you need to hear this story this way, because normally we are told that under IMF pressure, we had to open up our market, and that led to dominance of foreign firms. But think of it, even when a foreign firm is producing in our country, they are employing our people, generating employment. They are creating competition, keeping the prices in check at times. They are borrowing from our banks, giving them interest. They are creating rent for the people of India who give land or building to them on rent. So income gets created on both sides of the spectrum. Then some people say, still, why can't we have only Indian investors investing? That's again a point to understand, that if your Indian investors try to manipulate the market, if they try controlling the government, and more important than that, if competition gets thwarted, if new competition doesn't come in, because India is not that rich a country that immediately first generation investors will come up, then to create competition, to utilize the resources, to make sure that single companies don't become dominant, you need to introduce competition. Unfortunately, in spite of 30 years of reforms, we have not seen it happening completely in India. Still, majority of India's big markets are controlled by the Tatas and the Birlas and the Ambanis and Bajaj and so on. It is still not a full-fledged competition because of lack of reforms that have happened. That is why, as you ask me, Shaurya, you will hear very often that India needs more reforms to make sure that the economy comes back on track. Foreign savings through FDI, yes, Ria? डेफिसिट का मतलब नेगेटिव हो गया तो सरप्लस क्या बन जाएगा? डेफिसिट बन जाएगा वैभव, उम्मीद है तुम समझ गए होगे. अगर जो डेफिसिट है उसमें यहां लिखा मैंने करंट अकाउंट सरप्लस, लेकिन यहां माइनस साइन लग गया तो फिर सरप्लस तो रहेगा नहीं, फिर वो डेफिसिट बन जाएगा. वैभव, आई होप यू अंडरस्टैंड. Okay, Surbhi, as you asked me. So let's take this. The equation of macroeconomic stability shows that if private savings within the country are not sufficient to meet private investment and fiscal deficit requirements, then the country has to import resources which leads to high current account deficit. If private savings are not within the country are not sufficient to meet private investment and fiscal deficit requirements, then the country has to import resources which leads to high current account deficit. This current account deficit can be financed either by foreign borrowing or through inflow of foreign investment such that savings from abroad can fill resource gap in India. Therefore, foreign investment was allowed in India. I hope this write-up helps you. Correct, Srikant? Yes, if there is current account deficit, you need foreign savings to bridge the gap. So I hope this helps you. This is just what I told you. जो मैंने बोला वही लिख दिया है कि आपके पास एक राइटअप रहे कि इस मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक स्टेबिलिटी इक्वेशन का क्या मतलब है. I just wanted you to have a write-up on the meaning of what is meant by a macroeconomic stability equation. A macroeconomic stability equation implies that as economies have current account deficit, they need capital account inflow, which can be either through foreign borrowings or it can be through foreign investments. So India started opening up to foreign investment to bridge this gap. There are two gaps, Chaitanya. The gap on current account deficit and the gap between saving and investment. The amount of foreign exchange that you need and the amount of extra savings you need to bridge the basic investment level gap. All right. So, okay. So I will just give you a write up there also. The gap between domestic saving and investment plus G minus T is one resource gap, while the one created as a result of this current account deficit needs foreign exchange reserve to bridge it, which is the second resource gap. This is called dual gap in any economy. This is what you call a dual gap. The domestic resources that you need and the foreign resources that you need. Domestic savings to fulfill the domestic resources and foreign savings to fulfill the foreign resources. Alright, so dual gap analysis. So in that case, the current account deficit can be financed either by foreign borrowing or through inflow of foreign investment, such that savings from abroad can fill resource gap in India. Therefore, foreign investment was allowed in India. The gap between domestic saving and I plus G minus T is one resource gap, while the one created as a result of this current account deficit needs foreign exchange reserves to bridge it, which is the second resource gap. So one resource gap is domestic reserves, another is foreign exchange reserves, and together they are called dual gap. Okay. Then let's understand it further. It means in 1991, India introduced economic reforms with policies of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. LPG reforms, as they are called. Policies of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. LPG reforms, as they are called. Now we will try understanding what do they mean individually. So I'm introducing liberalization to you today. All right. Import of resources will result in a borrowing, Lomarche. So I'm introducing the idea of liberalization to you today. When we use the word liberalization, we start studying that today. It means removing restrictions on firms and household to encourage them to participate in economic activities, removing restrictions on firms and households to encourage them to participate in economic activities. This is done by simplifying rules, reducing regulations, and promoting policies which ease doing business. This is ease of doing business. Double F, mind you, which ease of doing business. So this is liberalization. When you remove restrictions on firms and households, when you encourage them to participate in economic activities, and by simplifying rules, by reducing regulations, by encouraging them to participate more. I'll give you an example, and a very non-economic example, but I hope you will understand the liberal idea. In fact, I'll give you two. Take one example of 7 years back when the government said that you don't need to get your documents attested by a group A officer, etc. You can self-attest it and submit it to the government. Now this is a policy of liberalization, that the government made it liberal. It was a colonial era rule that the certificate should be attested by a government officer. Why should one Indian citizen be asked to get it attested from another Indian citizen? There is nothing special. So why can't we have the situation of trust and verify? And that is what the government introduced. This is a situation called trust and verify, that we will trust people who are submitting their documents and we will verify it in any case later on. We will trust people who are submitting the document and we will be verifying it in any case later on with respect to the truthfulness. So in that case, people don't have to go to another person to get their documents attested. Simplifies the rules of participation. That is one example of liberalization. Another example that I keep saying, I don't know how far people will agree, is that removing compulsory attendance obligation on college students. That's liberalization. Saying that these are children who need to attend the class to make them better off, well then it means that we are not trusting them as adults. College students are people in 18, 19, 20 age group. We are trusting them to vote for the parliament of this country. We are trusting the girls to allow them to have a family and get married. But we say we don't trust them sufficiently to choose the classroom which they should attend. That's illiberal. A liberal system should say that if you want, you come to the classroom. You don't want, you don't come to the classroom. Because I can get you into my classroom. How do I make you listen to me? That's the larger challenge. So if you are self-motivated, then you are coming to the classroom for your own will, and you will definitely then listen to me and gain out of it. So these kind of policy methods is what we distinguish as liberal and illiberal. Liberal system will trust the citizens. It will assume that the citizens have bona fide intention, allow them to participate and do business, and punish them only if found wrong. An illiberal system will not trust its own citizen, will believe that the citizen are there to do something malafide, and will punish them at times by not letting them participate. So that is the difference between a liberal and an illiberal system that you try creating. But how do you pay for that current account deficit? To pay for that current account deficit, you need foreign savings, no? Okay, so I hope you understand the idea of liberal and illiberal here. India started taking actions to liberalize the economy through industrial reforms, taxation reforms, foreign market reforms, all these money market reforms. All this was done in India to liberalize. I will teach you industrial reforms, and I will teach you foreign market reforms, and I will teach you also the basics of money market reforms when I teach you money market as module 6.